There are a lot of questions the Reds can still answer this year. We'll tell you what they are on today's Locked On Reds.
You are Locked On Reds, your daily Cincinnati Reds podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Reds. My name is Jeff Carr, his name is Steve Offenbaker, and we are lifelong Cincinnati Reds fans that have been podcasting about this team on a pretty daily basis, sometimes weekly basis, for the better part of 12 years now. And we love this team. Seriously, I got baby pictures to prove it. I don't know if Steve has baby pictures to prove it or not, but I know that we've both loved this Reds team so much, despite the fact that they don't always seem to love us back. But we are excited to bring you another episode of the Locked On Reds podcast. And look, Locked On Reds is for everybody. We want to talk about the big thing going on in Reds country every single day. We want to dive into some geeky stats. And quite frankly, we're going to overreact to the daily motions of the MLB Ocean and the 162. But that is all because we love this team and we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team, your Cincinnati Reds every single day. And I'm glad that you're alongside us here today because we have some questions that need answered by this Reds team in the final 5 weeks. We're pretty much at the 5-week mark of the season. And we will ascertain as to whether or not the Reds can answer these questions in the time remaining. There's lots to get to, including Jonathan India. We're going to look at, the outfield and the mess that it's been this season. We're also going to take a look at some of the players that we have not expected to see a lot of, but we've seen a lot of them here recently. What role do they play in 2025? We're going to get to all of that on today's episode that is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app and create an account and use the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. And Steve, what time is it? It's time for us to answer some questions, or at least ask some questions that could be answered by this team, because I think you and I are both of the opinion that it's going to take a very large miracle at this point for the Reds to get back into a playoff conversation, especially after yet another bad loss. They lose to the Oakland A's 5-4 on Tuesday night. Just a very frustrating game. Bullpen performance by the pitching staff. The hitting was very inconsistent. Couldn't string anything together until they got a bunch of chances in the ninth inning against one of the best closers in baseball. But at the end, they could not bring it home. They now fall to 8 games back of the Atlanta Braves in the wild card race. And that's that update here, because we have questions that the Reds can or can't answer the rest of the way. And it starts first with this one. I want to throw this to you because I'm intrigued. Can Jonathan India prove he needs to stay at second base in 2025?
Everybody's probably screaming right now, like, what are you talking about? You and I talked about this off air, and it's probably good to talk about it right now just to frame up this conversation. And in his career, Jonathan India has been very, very bad defensively at second base. That is right up until the point this year where he was kind of forced back into playing second base before they ever moved him off. Remember, if we go all the way back to spring training, he was going to be an outfielder. He was going to be a utility infielder. He was going to be everywhere all the time. And instead, because of Matt McLain's injury, he went right back to second base. This is the first time in his career that he's had a positive about outs above average number. He's playing pretty well over there. So I understand where this question comes from. And I think Jonathan India will play some second base when they want to move Matt McLain to a day off or move Matt McLain to DH for a day. You'll see Jonathan India there. The only way that Jonathan India could be your everyday starter at second base is Matt McLain has to be your everyday starter at shortstop. And don't you dare, I know where you want to go with that, but you're also the same guy that's talking about, can we please stop playing infielders in the outfield? So if you're going to move Matt McLain to shortstop, you got to move Ellie someplace else. I think Ellie's a natural fit at third base, but to play him there, what do you do with Noelvi Marte? What do you do when Edwin Arroyo finally comes up in a year or two? I think long-term, Ellie De La Cruz is your third baseman. I would be happy with Matt McLain at short. Then you could play Jonathan India at second base. I don't see the Reds making that move, though. I don't see them moving Elly De La Cruz off of shortstop, which means that Matt McLain is your second baseman.
Here's my thought on this, because we know what we have in Jonathan India. He has taken a step forward. You mentioned the outs above average. I kind of broke that down for you. Even in his rookie of the year season, outs above average being the one fielding statistic that we kind of understand and like to refer to, though it is not in and of itself an end-all be-all. We know everything we need to know about this fielder based on this number, but it helps you understand it. In 2021, when India won Rookie of the Year, he had a -7 outs above average. In 2022, when he was plagued with injuries and really took a step back, -10. In 2023, at second base, -6 outs above average. And remember, he started to move off there, and they started to have Matt McLain play there a little bit in 2023. So this year, he jumps up and just completely surprises everybody, has a +2 outs above average. That is an 8 outs above average increase year over year. And quite frankly, it is massive considering the other 3 years combined. I think there's something to this, because the other part of this question here is, do we know for a fact that Matt McLain can stay healthy? And I get it. It is one big injury. It is not a myriad of injuries, but we are talking about an oblique that robbed him of the end of 2023 and a torn labrum that robbed him of all of 2024. I think that there is something to be had here, that maybe India is your plan A at second base. And then if Matt McLain can prove that he can stay healthy, then sure, let's do that. But I could see an infield, because this also brings in another question about Noelvi Marte. What do we know about him? I could see an infield of Jonathan India at second base, Matt McLain at short, and Elly De La Cruz at third base. And then you have Noelvi Marte trying to prove himself somehow. You have CES hopefully proving himself at first base, which I'll get to here in a little bit. But I really feel like the India question does have some other ones tied to it. And the only thing that I know about any of those questions is that India has proven himself at second base.
I don't disagree with you that he's proven himself, but I will say this. I'll go even a little bit further with this. If we're assuming that everybody's healthy heading into opening day, the only way that Jonathan India is the everyday starter at second base is if it's for another team. There's no scenario with everybody healthy that Jonathan India is your starter at second base. They'll find ways to shoehorn him in. They'll find at-bats for him, but it's not going to be his spot day in and day out. That spot's going to belong to Matt McLain or Spencer Steer, which we're going to talk about here in a little bit. One way or another, the only way Jonathan India is an everyday second baseman with health being assumed is for somebody else.
And we're asking questions that whether or not they can be answered the rest of the season. So I think that we're split on this. I think that he can prove it. You don't think he can. You don't think there's any chance that he will. Next question that we want to ask, and this in and of itself isn't a question that has a yes or no answer, but which relievers can prove themselves to be part of the 2025 bullpen? Because consider this year, where much of the season the bullpen was solid. I wouldn't say it was great, but it also wasn't bad. Here recently, though, it's really fallen apart, and a lot of it has to do with the fact that the bullpen ace has absolutely had a disappointing season. Don't throw the blown save statistic at me, because I don't care about saves. I'm talking about what a guy can control, and Alexis Diaz has seen his strikeout rate decrease and his walk rate increase. And those in and of themselves are very desperate things that I see in him, and the fact that his ERA has increased each of his 3 years in the major leagues. So this question is not just about him, it's about every relief pitcher, but is there anyone in the final 5 weeks of this season that is on the edge where it's just like, okay, he pitches well, he's in? Like, okay, is Jacob Junis a guy that could do that?
Maybe, but I don't think we're watching him over the next 5 weeks just to find out if he's going to be on this team or not. If Jacob Junis is being relied upon to be a integral part of this bullpen in 2025, it's a failure on Nick Krall's part. You mentioned Alexis Diaz. I don't think Alexis Diaz is pitching to be a member of this bullpen or not, but he's definitely pitching these last 5 weeks to be considered for closer or not. If he can't get it together and get it together quick, Nick Krall has an obligation to try and go out this offseason and get a shutdown reliever for the back end of this bullpen. Alexis Diaz has not been it. He hasn't been it all year long, and you can't head into 2025 just hoping that Alexis Diaz can recapture the magic. I think that if Buck Farmer finishes strong the way that he's pitched this year, he will be pitching for a prominent role in 2025. I think Fernando Cruz has showed us. Yeah, I think that Fernando Cruz has showed us he is not and should not be considered a viable option for this bullpen in the next year. I think Justin Wilson needs to show something if he wants the Reds to try and keep him around for another year. He's been wildly inconsistent and just really, if I'm looking for a way to describe how he's pitched. I think Sam Maul in this bullpen is a guy that you should definitely keep around. I think Emilio Pagan really needs to show something to warrant being brought back next year. And I hope that we see Brett Suter come back off of the injured list quickly and get some innings before this season ends, because I think he'd be valuable to have in this bullpen next year. But I want to see that he's worked through his injury and is able to be relied upon. There are a lot of question marks out in that bullpen. And these guys collectively really need to step up over the next 5 weeks, Jeff, because Nick Krall better be taking notes. He better be writing things down, and he better be ready in this offseason to attack this bullpen and upgrade it, because it's proven to be a pretty weak leak at times this year.
And I think that it's important to note, I saw this great stat, and I wanted to pull it up, but I couldn't find it. But this great stat that somebody used on Twitter a couple of weeks ago, talking about the Los Angeles Dodgers and how dominant performance-wise they've gotten out of their bullpen over the last 4 years. And they listed all of the guys that the Dodgers have used. They did not have the exact same bullpen for all 4 years. They had much different bullpens each and every year. So Nick Krall is going to have to be busy this offseason in replacing a lot of different dudes because, look, relief pitching is a fickle thing. I think that he has got to almost approach. I think Sam Maul, you can pencil in next year. And honestly, I think you can pencil in Tony Santillan for next year as well. He's looked pretty good.
Okay.
I think I would pencil him in too. Alexis Diaz, maybe Buck Farmer, although Buck Farmer you'd have to re-sign. He's only on a 1-year deal. But everybody else, they got to prove something to me. And some of them, I don't think that they can all very much prove it there, but definitely a few of them.
Well, listen, Jeff, we wanted to talk about Nick Lodolo in this segment, and the news is out. Nick Lodolo has a sprained middle finger, and Jeff has told me not to show you which finger on camera that he has sprained. But he has a sprained middle finger and is, in fact, done for the year. We're not going to see Nick Lodolo anymore this year. There was a lot of questions that he could have answered over the next 5 weeks that will remain unanswered, that will have to get answered in spring training. So that's why Nick Lodolo is not mentioned here. Look, Jeff, there's a lot of talent on the Reds infield. We just talked about some of it in the form of Jonathan India and the moves that would have to be made. But is there anyone playing outfield for this Reds team right now that will be back next season? Well, we're going to tell you coming up next. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and so much more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay's Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or you're going to get your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit available only to U.S. customers.
And the best way to enhance your baseball watching experience the rest of the way is with Prize Picks, America's #1 daily fantasy sports app. It's so easy to use. It's so easy to see why they are the #1 app, because you can literally turn $10 into $1,000 with just 4 picks in your entry. correct, because they've got a lot of great boosts and a lot of great modifiers that make it easier to increase your payouts. And all you got to do is you pick your favorite players like Ellie De La Cruz and Tyler Stevenson. You click more or less on your favorite stats like hits, homers, RBIs, total bases, and more, and you see your winnings roll in. Download the PrizePicks app today and use the code LOCKEDONMLB, and you'll get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code LOCKEDONMLB on PrizePicks, and you'll get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even have to win. You just get that $50 with the code LOCKEDONMLB. PrizePicks. Run your game.
Thank you so much for making Locked On Reds your first listen today. And for your second listen, enjoy the Locked On MLB podcast. Host Paul Sullivan, also known as Sully, is here daily to provide national expertise with his trademark humor to help you get ready for the MLB playoffs here in the dog days of summer. Prepare for the Fall Classic with Sully, who has it all covered every single day on Locked On MLB, available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, Jeff, we talked a little bit about the talent in this infield, how the Reds are going to have to juggle, slide people around depending if everybody's healthy. They have a whole different situation brewing in this outfield. You look around right now, the guys that are playing out there, many of them infielders that are just out there to get their bats in the lineup or because there's just really nobody else to play. But there they are. They're in the outfield. You look around this group that's playing outfield, and you have to kind of ask yourself the question, Jeff, should any of these guys be a part of this team in 2025?
And no, we are not talking about Santiago Espinal as an outfielder. I don't know why David Bell continues to put him out there. Golly, we saw that fly ball just fall in and out of his glove in the game against the A's on Tuesday night. That was super infuriating. There's just so many things about this that are so frustrating, but a lot of it just has to do with the deficiency of the guys that are currently on the roster. Like, I do not believe we will see anything. I don't know that he'll even show us anything, but I also don't know that Will Benson can prove that he should be on the opening day roster in these final 5 weeks. I don't know that he can prove it next spring training. He has had a horrible season, and I love Will Benson. I hate saying this, but based on what I've seen this year, Will Benson should not be on the Major League roster. But for lack of options, he is. In fact, the Reds are even telling us this. The Reds last night, Dom Smith got walked, I believe it was in the 7th inning. And so they pinch ran for him with Will Benson, who was on the bench. And then in the 9th inning, with a right-handed pitcher on the mound, they pinch hit Will Benson with a right-handed hitter. So they took away the righty-lefty advantage because they're like, no, you just can't do it. So they're literally saying that he is only on this roster out of pure necessity. And I hate it. But everything that he has shown us this year has been bad.
Yeah, I don't see that there's anything that Will Benson could do over the next 5 weeks that would make me say he should be part of this team next year. You know how I feel about spring training statistics. I don't see that there's anything he can do out in Goodyear next year to just change my mind about this. I think he needs a good, long, healthy stay in Louisville to try to work on some things next year. And then if there's an injury, if there's an opportunity, you try and see what improvements that he's made. If he's looked upon as being part of this outfield group next year, it's again a failure of Nick Krall. He's done nothing to say he deserves more chances than what he's got this year. So for me, he starts the season in Louisville. Another guy that just went on the injured list, Jeff, is Stuart Fairchild. He's another guy that has been playing a lot out of necessity, showed some value in a straight platoon role, has played some decent defense at times. But I still don't see him as a guy that you look at right now and you say, okay, we can count on Stuart Fairchild being here and doing these things, and we'll build around this and we'll create a platoon. I don't see him as being that guy. I see him as a spare part. I see him as a valuable 5th or 6th outfielder that you can have around if you need somebody to take up some at bats due to injury from time to time.
I was going to say, I think that he is a strong 5th outfield option. He is a weak fourth outfield option. And if he is deemed one of the 3 best outfielders heading into camp next year, then man, oh man. Look, Nick Kral's got a lot of lines that are drawn for him this offseason, and the outfield has quite a few of them because Stuart Fairchild has been fine defensively. Stuart Fairchild has been good on the base paths and great against left-handed pitching. He is unusable against right-handed pitching. And there's so much about the way that this outfield was made. It was almost as if they were betting on the platoons to hit. And for the most part, they haven't. He's been one of the success stories with this. But I don't see him as a guy. And now with his injury, which the reported injury was a UCL injury in his thumb. Like, do you know? I did not know that was a thing. I didn't know that yeah. So I don't know if we'll actually get to see him anymore the rest of this season because you say those letters together and I don't get a good feeling about it. That's for sure.
Yeah, and there's other guys, Jeff, that are missing out on an opportunity to maybe establish themselves for next year. Jake Fraley's one that really comes to mind. What a weird year that Jake Fraley's had.
Yeah.
Now he's on the 10-day injured list as well. You look at his numbers on the year, respectable batting average at 271. His on-base percentage is 323, but the power just has evaporated. Just absolutely no power at all. 3 home runs on the year, and I know that he's had a lot going on, but even with the batting average uptick and his ability to get on base a little bit better, he's still got an OPS plus of 91, so he's playing at 9% below league average. I was really hoping to get a good look at him here at the end to see if he could be a left-handed part of a platoon, knowing that Will Benson can't be the left-handed part of a platoon next year. I was hoping for Fraley to kind of get an opportunity to show us something. So that being said, I think maybe he's done enough in his career, and you can look at this season as maybe being an outlier of what he could really do power-wise. And you go into next spring with him in mind as maybe your 4th outfielder, as your left-handed part of a platoon in one of the corners. I can see Fraley filling that role.
And I think for me, and this is an interesting one because there's going to be some folks that immediately jump all over this, but hear me out for just a moment. Let me set this up. Spencer Steer needs to prove that he can defensively play in the outfield because he hasn't yet. And quite frankly, I don't know if he will prove that to me in the final 5 weeks of this season. He is in the outfield because his bat has to be in the lineup every single day. I do not dispute that. You got to figure out a way to keep him in the lineup as much as you possibly can. But he is not an outfielder. He is an infielder masquerading as an outfielder because the lineup needs him. And if all things were being considered equal, he should be playing first base. But quite frankly, if you take him out of this outfield right now, you are just putting another infielder out there. So that's not going to change between now and the end of the season. But I think that based on the moves that the Reds should make this offseason, he should not be relied upon to be an everyday outfielder. You and I both said in the offseason that Spencer Steer should be like a Ben Zobrist. Ben Zobrist did not stick at one position. And that's basically what Spencer Steer has done for much of the season. I know early on in the year, he did play some in the infield. I think he's played like 2 or 3 games at second base, which every time he does that, we hear that it's his best position. Okay. But I really feel like he is not defensively going to prove to me that he should defensively be in the outfield next year.
No, even if he plays error-free outfield the rest of the way, we talked about him being Zobrist. We talked about him needing to move around, and we talked about that he could be decent in all of those positions. I think that remains true, but only one guy. We did this exercise last offseason, Jeff. You got to identify one guy to be your super utility, and that's got to be your super utility. We're talking about it possibly being India. We're talking about it possibly being Steer, where the outfield is a big problem for this Reds team. In my opinion, we haven't talked about TJ Friedl yet. We haven't talked about what else the Reds can do. I personally think that they need to go into the offseason thinking of TJ Friedl as their 4th outfielder, and they need to go sign 3 outfielders. They need upgrades at all 3 positions. Sign 3 starting outfielders, and then figure out what you're going to do with the rest of the pieces.
And there's going to be episodes in the future where we break down why they can do that. This is not something that is out of the realm of possibility. They absolutely can do that. And we'll tell you how on later episodes. We have a question that is written down on our rundown, but I want to save that for tomorrow's episode because I think it kind of puts a bow on all of the other questions. And yes, it has to do with David Bell, but we're going to talk about that on tomorrow's podcast. So make sure everydayers you're with us. And if you're not an everydayer, make sure you subscribe and you don't miss tomorrow's episode. But look, with all these questions abounding, we are seeing a handful of players that, quite frankly, we didn't expect to see a lot of, but we are seeing a lot of them. What is their role in 2025? We'll discuss that coming up next. It's time to take a water break here in the episode, but you know what? I got something even better because Liquid IV hydrates you just as good as 2 bottles of water. That's right. I'm going to drink 1 glass of water with Liquid IV, and I'm going to get twice the hydration. Liquid IV's got all these great flavors, too, that enhance your water. You literally turn your water into super water because all you do is you pour a packet into a glass of water, just like I'm doing right here. Stir it up nice and good, and take a nice sip. That, by the way, is their awesome flavor popsicle firecracker. You got to check it out today. You can get 20% off your first order of Liquid IV when you go to liquidiv.com and use promo code MLB at checkout. Again, that's 20% off your first order when you shop Better Hydration today using the promo code MLB at liquidiv.com.
You can take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Game Time. Jeff and I have talked about this app over and over again. We love this app. We use it all the time. We've been telling you today, there's lots of questions that the Reds can answer the remainder of this season. And if you want to see them answer those questions with your own eyes, use the Game Time app to buy your tickets. The Game Time app has all-in pricing. When you get on there, you're going to know exactly how much you're going to pay for the seat that you're buying. And if you're not familiar with the view from that seat, they have that in the app as well. You can see what it's going to look like from your seat. So Jeff and I, we head down to the banks. We find a good spot. We grab a couple beverages, grab a little bit to eat. And then as it gets close to time for the first pitch, we jump on the Game Time app. We find great deals on our tickets, and then we head on into the ballpark. If you want to get in on this action, just download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONMLB, and you're going to get $20 off your first purchase. That's even in addition to the savings that you already have just by using the app. Terms do apply. Again, create your account and redeem the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed.
That's good. You know what? You can catch every pitch of the Reds' hometown broadcast with SiriusXM. Just download the SXM app and search the word Reds, and you can take the Reds' hometown broadcast with you everywhere you go. Also, bookmark CincinnatiRedsTalk.com. I've got some great written content over there. Greg Kuffner, who is at Reds Daily on Twitter, has a lot of great written content over there, and James Rapine as well, and Steve is writing every so often, and some other great folks too. So check out CincinnatiRedsTalk.com, bookmark that site today. All right, Steve, want to close out this episode. We've been talking a lot about potential answers that the Reds could give to some key questions in the final 5 weeks of the season. And this last one, I kind of want to focus on some of the guys, some of the names that we've heard a lot that we didn't expect to hear a lot of. I'm talking about the Ty Francis of the world. I'm talking about the Dom Smiths, the Santiago Espinals, even maybe the Jacob Junises a little bit. Some of the relief pitchers that the Reds seemingly sort of trot back and forth between Louisville and Cincinnati. Who of this group of players, and you have a great nickname for them, I'm going to give you credit for that, you can call that nickname here, who of them are going to prove that they can stay in the final 5 weeks of this season?
Yeah, this is the Bandaid Gang. These are the guys that have been brought up and brought in as Band-Aids to fill in for all of these boo-boos that keep popping up for the Cincinnati Reds. So this is the Bandaid Gang. And there's a couple guys that I think actually do have a chance to maybe still be around after this season. The first guy that I want to talk about real quick, Jeff, is the first of the Bandaid Gang. He came to the team way back in March when Matt McLean got hurt. Nick Krall goes out and makes a last-minute move with the Toronto Blue Jays and brings in Santiago Espinal. I love the fact that the Reds have multiple years of team control remaining for Espinal. Yep. He's going to be part of this team, and the way that he has played of late makes me think he's going to be a valuable guy on the Reds bench in 2025 and beyond. He showed us why he's a former All-Star. He gets hot. He plays well. He's a little streaky, but is able to do things except catch a fly ball in the outfield. All of the other things the Reds have asked him to do, he's been able to do. I think for me, he is the number one guy of the Bandaid Gang that will stick around, that will still be here. They've brought in other guys, Jeff. We most recently we saw them bring in Ahmed Rosario. We saw them bring in Dominic Smith. I don't anticipate either one of those guys being with this team next year. You look at the pitching staff. I think if I had to identify a pitcher that might be pitching for his life, might be pitching for a role, for some kind of opportunity with this team next year, it's Carson Spiers. This is a guy that we didn't really expect to pitch as much as he has had to pitch. He was not a guy for sure that was in our conversations last March when we were talking about what this rotation could be. But that's a big ask because we know Rhett Lauder is coming soon. Probably not this year, but he's going to be competing for a rotation spot in 2025. We know that Chase Burns is not that far off of Rhett Lauder. He's going to be competing. Brendan Williamson's coming back from injury. Hunter Green will be back. Nick Lodolo will be back. That Carson Spiers is a guy that needs to use these last 5 weeks as effectively as possible to remain relevant in the conversation. And in the bullpen, we talked about some guys. Will they stick? Will they not? I haven't seen anything from any of the Bandaid Gang, with the exception of the guy you mentioned earlier on. That's Tony Santillan. Of the people that got to come up because of injury, that got to come up because of the need for the Reds to fill innings, Santillan's a guy I think that if he can continue to pitch well these last 5 weeks and can come into the spring looking much the same, he could be a guy that competes to be a holdover and be in this bullpen next year.
Yeah, I think Santiago Espinal is written in pen that he's going to be on this team at least next year, and if not a couple of years from now, because he is under team control, I believe, until 2027. So he's going to be around for a little while. I think another guy that you didn't mention on the pitching side, Julian Aguiar, could be pitching his way into a role. I don't know what that role is going to be. I don't think it's going to be in the starting rotation, but it could be as like a long relief mop-up kind of dude who is sitting on the back of the bullpen, and hopefully a guy that can give you length if you've got a starter that didn't quite have a good day or something like that. He can be that kind of a guy for this team, or he could be a 6 or 7 or 8 starter down in AAA, and he's ready to go at a moment's notice. Probably a little bit more of a more valuable position for him. But I definitely think he's played his way into some kind of conversation next year, especially considering the fact that there have been so many guys. Like, we talk about all these injuries that the starting rotation, now that Nick Lodolo is on the IL, you literally have every single person who was on the starting rotation on opening day is either on the IL or pitching for the Milwaukee Brewers right now. It is crazy what we are seeing here at the final 5 weeks of this season, what the pitching staff looks like. But to add on to that, Brandon Williamson, who just started a rehab assignment yesterday, actually looked okay, pitched 2 2/3 innings, struck out the side in the second inning of that outing. But he is just now beginning a rehab assignment. If we see him at all, it might be for like 2 starts this year. Connor Phillips, really hate to see what has happened to him this year because he has just lost the strike zone. He cannot find it, and he cannot be counted upon for anything. Lyon Richardson has been moved to the bullpen in AAA, so he is not on the starting rotation depth. Like, Julian Aguiar could be a very important update for this team, not because he's going to push for a rotation spot, but because he's going to help out the depth that has so badly been depleted this season. As much as we touted it before the season started, it's gone. And so can he be a part of that? I think he has made a very good case to be in that conversation.
Yeah, I think it's much more likely that he's the 6th starter. He's the next guy up from Louisville than it is to see him in the bullpen, because I think, I hope that we're going to see Graham Ashcraft fill that role of innings eating workhorse out of the bullpen next year. I think that's what's going to happen. And that is probably a good spot, Jeff, to go ahead and wrap it up for today. This episode went a little long because there's lots to talk about here, and we're going to continue to dig through these things. We're going to set the table over the next 5 weeks and look at what the Reds are doing and look at how that impacts potential offseason moves, so that when we get to the offseason, we can keep you guys informed and updated about what the Reds may or may not do, because it's kind of time to start looking through that lens. And this was our way of starting that conversation.
Yes, and this is focusing on the final 5 weeks. Quite frankly, there's going to be multiple episodes as we get into the offseason about all the questions that have come up this year pertaining to next year, because while they've answered a few key ones, they have probably brought up more questions than we thought they would the way that this season has gone. So make sure that you're with us every step of the way, and make sure that you are subscribed to the podcast and become an everydayer and all that great stuff. But before we go, I would like to invite you to become a Locked On Reds Insider. I am offering a free 14-day trial to join me by texting Insider to 513-597-0944. We'll text back and forth daily about the Cincinnati Reds. And, you can become that friend in your friend group that everyone looks for to Reds information about. And you can talk ball with me. And we're going to do this all throughout the offseason as well. And after that 14-day free trial, it's just $4.99 a month. Let's talk Reds. Again, text the word Insider to 513-597-0944 for a 14-day free trial to become a Locked On Reds Insider today.
All right, that's going to do it for this edition of Locked On Reds. Thanks for making us your first listen. Go check out the Locked On MLB podcast. Prepare for the Fall Classic with Sully, who has it covered every single day. You can find the link for Locked On MLB in the description of today's show, so you don't even need to search for it. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, just like us. We are your team every day. So until next time, we're going to keep you Locked On Reds every single day.
Lots of questions that need answering. We're going to take another sip of this liquid IV.